This is Talk Business and Politics with Roby Brock.
And welcome to today's Talk Business and Politics Daily. It's Monday. I am with John Brummett of the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette. Good to see you.
Good to be here.
We had a little wager last week about the State of the Union address, and was it going to be presidential or was it not going to be presidential?
Yeah.
I kind of feel like that I might have still won, because even though he did come across as more presidential than expected, he blew it by the end of the week. So
I don't believe that was the bet, nor do I believe that was your firm prediction. I believe what happened, just to refresh our viewers, both of them. I know that we have many more than that. I know. I thought that this would be Trump's best opportunity and likeliest occasion to try to pivot to a more serious, legislatively relating kind of speech. I didn't predict it, because I said nobody can predict what this guy will do. But I said that would be the time, and if he didn't do it then, I don't know if he ever would. You interjected quite unnecessarily, as a mere.
I had to make sure that you weren't dominating all the talk.
That you were going to go out on a limb and say that he was going to continue the kind of speech he'd given to CPAC. It's
true.
It's two things. One, I was right and you were wrong. But two, it was all rendered moot, as most things are with Trump, in a matter of hours. 48, I think, or 72.
All right, we're going to get to Trump in the second block here.
We're
going to stay focused here, first of all, on the state of Arkansas. I want to begin. It's the last day of bill filing today, and there was a bill filed to have the right to be left alone. Is this something that you persuaded Jeremy Hutchinson to file this bill on your behalf? What's up with that?
I find that people don't have a great deal of trouble leaving me alone. If they're put in a bill to stop people from disparaging me in letters to the editor and online comments, but I didn't see that bill.
All right.
No, I think I'm innocent of any complicity in that particular legislation. There is a constitutional carry bill that's been put in. You know, the gun debate is still percolating out there, and a lot of other last day,
a few hundred others,
peculiarities that you have to take days to wade through to see. And most of them, we can hope, will just run out of time before they can all get considered.
We'll probably talk about some of those next week as they get fleshed out a little bit more. Let's talk about the governor's press conference today. He, about an hour before we sat down and talked here, he kind of laid out his vision for changing Arkansas Works, some new waivers he's going to ask the federal government. Kind of your big takeaway from what all he said at the press conference there. What's the biggest change that he's kind of seeking?
The single biggest is that Arkansas Works, or the private option, whatever you prefer to call it, has covered persons up to 138% of the poverty level. That's been the Medicaid expansion population, and those people have gone into Medicaid and had their insurance secured through Medicaid funds by the state. He is simply going to cut that off at 100% of the poverty level, and those 38 people from 100% to 138% will no longer be covered by Medicaid. They will receive notice provided they get the waiver, they will receive notice over the next few months that they're being moved into the general population, and they should go on their health care exchange, and they would likely get most of their premiums subsidized by the status quo. This all hinges on what the health care reform is, except they might have to pay a little more. It's basically a way for the state to save money. The state just ships those costs to the federal government. And it also adds sort of a cosmetically conservative veneer to we're covering fewer people.
The universe isn't as big, correct.
As you know, the state, while this has been a successful program, most people believe, the governor is among those who believes that they're just getting a little too big. We didn't know it was going to keep. We're up to what, 300 and some odd?
330,000.
This is more than we thought, and so I think this is a way to try to trim that. You want to know what else is in the program?
Well, there's a work requirement that he wants to put on there.
He wants to basically impose the same sort of work requirements for, quote, able-bodied recipients that apply now to food stamps, to the SNAP program, and that gets into, we had a little Q&A session about, you're talking about what constitutes able-bodied, and what about mothers at home with 2 or 3 children? Would they be considered able-bodied? And they said all that would be worked out. But that's the key component. I mean, a couple of conservative legislators were standing over to the side, and I went over to them after, won't call their names. I said, is this mean enough for you? And they didn't appreciate the question. But they said they refused to accept the question in that phrasing.
Gotcha.
But that's these folks quit taking our money without getting out there and working and defining who's able-bodied. There's that. Also, there will be some money. The state will take the money now used for Medicaid coverage for people around 75% of poverty and up, if they are employed for so little as 75% part-time, I would assume, in a small business. If that employer will give them full benefits for health care, then the state will use that share that it would normally use to buy them insurance to subsidize the employee plan, which those tend to be cheaper. The idea, everything he's trying to do is move people off this thing. He wants to keep it because he thinks it's a good program for the generally, but it's just
lose the dependency. So
yes,
to say.
he wants to, and also, and then go ahead.
Well, the final thing was that he wanted to move Arkansas to an assessment state versus a determination state. What does that mean?
Well, that's a very good question, and that was given sort of short shrift, and I don't know. I can't say for sure what that does, except what was explained superficially today. Is Arkansas is now a determination state for Medicaid, which means if somebody, say, goes on the marketplace online and enters their data, the federal government beholds that data and determines whether that person is therefore to be shipped to the Arkansas Medicaid program based on their eligibility. And Arkansas has to accept the determination of the federal government.
Right.
This would argue, he said the waiver request would argue that the state had done everything it could to demonstrate that it's now capable of doing that itself, and that Arkansas should be made an assessment state, which means the federal government does not make that determination, leaves that determination to the state. That's either simple or it's enormous. I asked one of the aides after, does that mean that when we were doing that purge last year, when all these people were getting these notices to notify, in 10 days if you don't verify your income, you get thrown off of Medicaid, and the federal government told them to stop and give more time, would that affect that kind of arrangement? People thought that was a good question. They didn't think so. But all of this is part of the Republican notion to continue this program, but do it in a more conservative way that puts more responsibility on the recipient and saves the state money in the long term. But it's all highly contingent on what the Trump Republican health care plan, if it ever emerges, will do.
At some point in time.
Right.
So there's a lot more kind of moving parts to all of this. We certainly will have our
And there'll be a
hands full.
special session.
There'll be a special
You'll have
session.
to,
to do
not
that
only,
too.
and a couple of these waivers will require Arkansas legislation. And, and Jonathan, this man got up and said to probably take more time to consider these things than we have available now, and it'll probably be a special session. So it's a big deal, but a very fluid deal at the moment.
All right, let's take a quick commercial break. We're going to come back and talk about President Trump. I'm Roby Brock with John Brummett. We're back right after this.
Arkansas Electric Cooperative Corporation provides electric energy across 2/3 of Arkansas. This is an exciting time in our energy history, with incredible progress being made in renewable energy and storage technologies. As our energy portfolio continues to diversify, we'll maintain an all-the-above strategy to provide reliable and affordable electricity. Ever since the first light bulbs were placed in our members' homes, the electric cooperatives have been the solutions provider for our members, and we want to continue that well into the future.
Each day, the promise of our nation begins again. Arkansas and America, moving forward. I help make that promise a reality. It's not for everyone, but people everywhere depend on us.
Oh, I love you too, sweetie.
Trucking delivers, or everything stops. And that's what drives me.
I did.
And welcome back. I'm Roby Brock. We're with John Brummett of the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette. Let's turn our attention to some national affairs. We're going to leave out the travel ban. We're going to leave out more on the State of the Union. We're going to leave out North Korea and Iran and all that stuff, because I think that we
Only
will...
the major national, international.
Because over the weekend, President Trump said that former President Obama wiretapped him, surveilled him, but did not offer much proof in that other than to say he had learned. Is it a true or a false allegation?
Based on everything that I have heard from people who would be in a position to know, it's a false allegation. There may well be surveillance, wiretaps, phone intercepts of Russian officials, and there may be some Trump people overheard on those. There might be some digital intercepts, some email intercepts that have to do with involve Trump people and the Russian people. There might even be some sort of data about financial arrangements between Trump or Trump people and Russian banks or Russian financiers. That may all be taking place. But the idea that Obama would singularly direct that this president-elect Trump get his phone tapped and phones tapped in Trump Tower, I can't find anybody.
It would be pretty illegal.
It would be blatantly illegal.
Yeah.
And he would have had to co-opt the FBI to do it, presumably. And there's no indication. One thing Comey will do if he thinks the FBI has been offended in its mission, he's demonstrated he'll call a news conference or make a statement. He'd like to in this case,
Yeah,
I'm told.
he's been pushing behind the scenes.
You know, every indication is that there's no truth to this. The best that Sarah Huckabee and Sean Spicer and Kellyanne Conway can do to speak for Trump is to say, well, he's the president. He may know something that the rest of us don't know. Well, then if he's going to go, if he's so sure of it that he goes on Twitter at 6 o'clock on a Saturday morning and says it for a fact and calls his predecessor either a sick or a bad guy, then it is incumbent on him to substantiate it. And I do not believe that he can, because I don't believe that any evidence exists for it to be substantiated. What it comes down to, let me summarize what it's coming down to. The president said for an absolute fact that Barack Obama tapped his phones. And the White House counsel put out a statement saying, we need to find out if this is true. The president said for a fact, and his employees...
After supposedly reading a Breitbart article that alluded to this.
But nobody else seems to get this. The president said, he's in charge of the White House. He said on Twitter, he said, it's true, this happened. The White House counsel said, we need to find out if it's true. Well, now,
It's a little bit back to the argument that we had a few weeks ago on election fraud, where he claimed there was election fraud, but there was no proof of the election fraud, and
So
he
let's
called on Congress
investigate.
to investigate that, which
Yeah.
hasn't moved anywhere either. So,
Well, if the White House counsel wants to know whether what the president said for a fact is true, go ask the president to prove it. We don't have to have an investigation. The president said it for a fact. This is, look, you don't want me to get into this. Let me be brief about it. This time last week, or the day after, last Wednesday and Thursday, I thought the possibility existed that Trump had made a pivot and was going to behave more presidentially based on his speech, and had seen polling benefit of that, and had a chance. I always believe a presidency can be restored. I've seen many restored. And I thought that might happen. But this man appears constitutionally incapable of maintaining that level of restraint. He simply does.
Yep.
I mean, that's just been demonstrated time and again. So that's where we are.
So every time that something like this happens, it seems to just kind of take the whole narrative of Trump ties to Russia to another level, which is really kind of what this has done again too. Are they ever going to be able to sweep this thing under the rug? I would say that there's too much toothpaste out of the tube at this point.
Out. The tooth, as you say, your metaphor's right. The toothpaste is out. You can't put it back. And a guy asked me last night, what do you think it'll come to in the end? I think very possibly it'll come to nothing more than ill-advised but non-criminal chumminess. Just that's what in the end it'll come to. But we can't say that for sure, absent an investigation based on the varied context that we know to have occurred, and on the lack of forthrightness, say in Michael Flynn and what he said. I'm less impressed by Sessions. I don't think that's not that big a deal to me. But there's this theory that Trump may be doing this simply to change, distract us from the Russian thing. But I find in this case, it has simply given us two matters of focus. One is this guy really stable enough to be our president? He keeps behaving this way. And two, we need to look more strongly than ever at this Russian thing, because it seems to be bugging him so much. I don't think he's succeeding in any way. The way his presidency succeeds is to be the president he was last Tuesday night.
Right.
And get off of Twitter and talk like a president. But he can't do it.
All right. He's John Brummett with the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette. As always, good to have you with us.
Well, it's a great pleasure.
All right.
I look forward to every Monday.
We do too.
All right.
That is all for today's Talk Business and Politics Daily. Thanks so much for watching. I'm Roby Brock. We'll see you next time.